We are 24 hours away from the greatest words in sports. It's game seven of the 2025 NBA Finals, and this is Sach in the franchise. I'm Chris Sachi. That's Steve Kemp, and we have seen lots of game sevens in our time, Steve. Enough, and even in the history that you've done to where you have made your Substack debut. You have written a beautiful article about the beauties of game sevens, and we're going to break it all down here on Sach and the franchise. Steve, a wonderful job on your debut, dipping the quill pen for the first time, and it was phenomenal stuff, all about the magic of Game Sevens.
Well, I appreciate the hype up job there. You're a great promo guy. You're a great promo cutter. Um, I really was thinking about this, after the game. I overslept I kind of fell asleep in the third, fourth quarter of
Uh-huh.
game six. I overslept our podcast, and I felt like I had woke up and kind of felt like, oh no, I had all these things to say
Uh-huh.
and I have nowhere to put it. And so I memorialized it in a Substack, and I plan to continue writing Substacks about sports and culture, because I think there's something here. I think there's between you and I doing this and dipping the quill pen a little. I think the creative output is really healthy, and I encourage everyone else to maybe try doing a little more creative stuff. This has been great for my self-esteem just talking to you, brother.
That's right. I mean, this is stuff we've always talked about off of the air, and we finally have pushed the record button and the red light and say, let's just talk about this in a public setting. It just gets your energy up a little bit higher. It gets the excitement going. And writing, it's like it's creative stuff, and it's the start of something very special, Steve. And when you're doing this article, you're not just kind of writing from the hip, like you're quoting things. You've listed out some of the greatest game sevens ever, which we can touch on. But just to kind of like set up what the people can see on the page as they read this article, and we'll put the article in the comments section of our podcasts everywhere you can get your podcasts. But there's like an awesome quote that you got that just explains the beauty of Game Sevens that can kind of just like tidal wave us into this discussion of tomorrow's finality of this 2025 season. Yeah, drink a
It's
little
a long
water, hydrate.
if you've read the article, it's a little long one. I needed a little bit of a warm up there.
Yeah.
So for a little context, this is from a great book called There's Always This Year, Story of Basketball and Ascension by Hanif Abdurraqib. I found this on the Pablo Torre Finds Out podcast. He did a great episode talking about Hanif's life and about basketball and LeBron, and the
Mm.
really resonated with me was the consistency of LeBron in Hanif's story, because I've always felt that in my life, the consistency of having this great figure running through your life. And LeBron's been a part of our last NBA Finals Game 7.
Uh-huh.
So that's kind of how he's setting this up in the novel.
Wow.
So I'm going to start here.
Yeah.
And it is astonishing that we've made it this far dancing on the outskirts of two Game 7 scenes without my mentioning of how in love I am with the finality of a Game 7. Rather, the control one might have over the finality, turning away from the ominous finger beckoning from beneath a black cloak and making your own exit on your own time. I love a Game 7 because I have, from many high up and far off windows, seen a sunset I wished I could bottle. There have been inevitable night times that I have wanted to keep behind a door that I would push my back against, even in the midst of darkness, thrashing on the other side just for another moment or another hour with that flamboyant and dramatic marching color band of color blaring against the sky's canvas, the blaring horns of orange and yellows, and the faint but always present keys of purple and reds twirling underneath, and the conductor of all that racket, glorious racket, the sun itself, twirling towards vanishing until all that remain are the colors, their fluorescence growing faint in preparation for being washed away by that familiar and vicious darkness. I have even run out of ways to talk about beauty, which is surely a sin, but also how I know that I have witnessed that which dismantles a capacity for language, renders any attempt foolish. If you know this feeling like I know this feeling, welcome to the church of silence and awe. Our mouths are wide open, but nothing spills out. Our backs against this trembling door, praying to the cut the veil of night into small scattered pieces. If you know this feeling as I have known this feeling, if you have wanted to hold the moment before an inevitable ending in your hands and stretch it to near distortion, you also love a game seven. Someone has to go home, and yet no one wants to. The party was good, but it has to end for someone, even if the sweetness of a stranger's kiss still spills upon the lips of a person who will never see that stranger again. They have to exit through the door of their own fantasies and never return.
Mm,
I
mm,
think this quote encompasses everything that we feel on the backs of our necks during a game seven. Um, it hits me in the chest. I often get really excited for a game seven, but then I sometimes don't even enjoy them because I'm so stressed out, even
yeah,
without having any involvement in the game.
that's right.
Because every insignificant little detail becomes so significant in the grand scheme of things. It's the magnitude of the moment, I think, is what really brings me to the Church of Silence and Awe.
I mean, if that doesn't fire you guys up, I mean, there really is nothing that could. And you think about all of the beauties of the Game Seven, and I didn't realize that until reading this, Steve, that the last finals Game Seven was one of the best Game Sevens ever played in any sport. You could even argue was 2016 Cavs Warriors that came down to the wire and was in the epicenter of this like clash of these two titans, and really amazing that that was is part of this whole beautiful story and the idea of a sunset you're trying to hold on to, but you know that is it's going like any other night, it's going to go away forever. And we're gonna do a confidence ratings going into this game seven in the next segment with each and every guy because this is so important, Steve. We have to flesh this out, but just how amazing it is that this is where we stand ending the 2025 season.
It's a lot of people talk down on it going into this ending,
Hmm.
and I think a big part of the conversation. I read an article earlier in the Atlantic talking about is ESPN and the NBA ready for the moment?
Mm.
Because this moment has been built. This is a really significant moment in basketball history.
Hmm.
You can look at the records. I wrote about this in the Substack too.
Hmm.
You look at the records for each team. Uh, the Thunder would be tied for third all time. They would have a worse winning percentage than the 97 Bulls, and fewer wins than the 96 Bulls. And the 2016 Warriors won 88 games, didn't win a championship. But if the Thunder get it done tomorrow, they're going to be 84 and 21,
Mm.
and one of the best teams of all time.
Yeah.
And certainly the best championship winning team of the 21st century when it comes to winning basketball games.
Right.
You look at the Pacers, they started out worse than any team has over the first 25 games and then gone on to potentially win a championship.
Wow.
'06 Heat and the 55 Syracuse Nationals. They were 14 and 11, and the Pacers were 10 and 15.
Yeah.
Now, they have the best record in the NBA or in the East rather over the last 50 games of the year. That helps.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you you see where these teams are in terms of NBA history conversation. You see where these players are. We're gonna talk about everyone when it comes to these confidence ratings. And I think for me at least, how I perceive these guys in the history of the game and their comparisons, um, I think that plays a big role in it. So I think the stakes have been set. I really, really am hoping that the league and the network come together in one moment of synergy to honor this basketball moment we haven't had since 2016.
Yeah. Yeah. And just to touch on that presentation part that we've discussed throughout these finals, you look at the 2016 finals, that was the prime of you can say that was the prime of the NBA pretty much since MJ and since we've been watching. I'll say that. I wouldn't want to say since MJ, but we know that the post MJ NBA struggled. It really did up until I could probably say the ascension of that, early to mid 2010s. And you had Mark Jackson, SVG, and like Beiji, and like that was prime. And it is an interesting question: is the league ready for this moment? But the reason why we're gonna do this every player flesh out in segment B is because of the respect we have for game sevens. How much we understand that the game seven hinges on every little thing. And both fan bases are gonna pick apart every little thing if they lose. If you win, all the flaws, all the warts are forgotten, but the crushing losses of game sevens, you microanalyze every little play. And that's why we're going to do that because of the respect we have. And before we do that, just thinking about either looking at this matchup from more of a holistic view. It's really interesting just how good, like you mentioned also, Steve, how good the Thunder have been. I feel like we're not ready as a culture, as a media, to kind of say that because they didn't close Game Six. They needed seven to beat Denver. Like they haven't been perfect because of the second youngest team ever to make the finals since the 76, 77 Portland Trailblazers. By average age, they're the second youngest team ever. So they have some of those warts. They didn't close out. They needed a lot to beat Denver. When looking back on that, Denver was really shorthanded versus the deepest team in the league. And so for a team that won what, 68 regular season games, I feel like they're not getting that respect, but it's because they haven't necessarily been that gritty veteran team that shut the door that we've seen from some of the greats that you mentioned in what could be some of the greatest of all time if they win. So, really curious to see how that measures up. And also, because these are the two deepest teams in the NBA, we have to look at every guy because both of these coaches are going to deploy every guy. We talked about it before we hopped on. Game sevens, you'll see one guy get a stretch of minutes, and if he doesn't look ready to play, he will not return to the floor. Even guys who are really big bench contributors, or even starters, are getting pulled. Like these things are all really important, and that's why this deserves so much attention for what's going to be an epic game seven.
Everyone's leash is as short as can be.
Hmm.
But also everyone's potential for getting in the game is as great as it is.
Yeah, that's right.
These coaches have both, Carlisle's famous for this. Dagnall has tried to keep up in
Uh-huh.
terms of trying different matchups. And as the series has gone on and on, like exploit different things. I think we'll see. I mean, maybe we'll talk this in the cons, but I think we'll see Siakam come out on Jalen Williams. That was like during that big stretch in the second quarter of Game Six. You had Siakam kind of on Williams, and that kind of freed up a lot of backcourt space to intercept the ball, and
Uh-huh.
it was really interesting. Like I think we have potential. Like I liked the Usman Dieng minutes. I'm with
Yeah.
Russillo on that. Like I think we have potential to see anybody come out and like make an impact in this game seven. It's it's really fascinating. The odds are stacked against Indiana.
Mm.
Almost 79% of home teams facing a game seven at home,
Mm.
champion in the championship win.
Mm.
There's only four that have ever lost at home in the NBA Finals. The 2016 Warriors, the last time it happened. You
Hmm.
have the 78 Sonics, who got revenge the following year.
Yeah.
You have the 74 Bucks, who were in the West then. They lose to the Celtics.
Uh,
And you have the 69 Lakers lose to Bill Russell in his last game.
wow. I mean that.
That's it. So Indiana trying to put OKC on like a really short list of people not able to get it done. That would be very interesting. Um, I just man, I am in love with this matchup. I am in love with this game tomorrow, and it can't come any sooner.
Yeah, yeah, it's so exciting, and it's really like we also have always said this in game sevens in any round. The legs are always a factor, and I'm gonna say that it's the NBA Finals and it's less of a factor because you're not playing every other day like you are in most rounds. So to me, that's less of a factor, and I think what's more of a factor is what you mentioned, Steve, is the matchups and the coaching. And so when you look at it like that, and the Thunder are 10-2 at home this postseason, like they've been unbelievable at home. The road stuff is where their youth tends to get in the way. And it's really like what I look at this whole series as is unstoppable force and immovable object. You have the best defense in the league by far in OKC, and you have the fastest, quickest paced, hardest to stop offense in the league by far in Indiana. And so in game seven, which one is going to be more powerful? In game six, it was Indiana pretty much out of Jump Street because OKC didn't look very good. They turned the ball over. What was it? Eight? I think Shea had eight turnovers himself,
Yeah,
and
that Indiana
that allowed Indiana to
defense
get downhill.
that Indiana defense stepped
Hmm.
up big time. I
Hmm.
mean, they ascended right there, and if they continue that ascension, this is could really get. if Oklahoma City doesn't show out in their two-way fashion,
Hmm.
this could be a similar either side could be a similar show to the most recent Game 7 in the league, which was OKC in Denver,
Yeah.
and where OKC just kind of ran that in the second quarter.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing, you speak of quarters, I think the first quarter of tomorrow's game is really going to paint a big picture because we're going to see, like you said, Indiana's defense really had a rise. I'm going to attribute some of that to Carlisle and the staff because what they did was throughout the series, we saw SGA's production has diminished. It really has. Indiana found a way to stop him, but it came at the cost of Jalen Williams, who was phenomenal in game five. Like he looked like a real riser. And then all of a sudden, game six, Indiana found out a way to stop both of them. And then OKC didn't really know where to go. Are we going to see more? You know, when you look at OKC, you look at Shea, who's the MVP, scoring champion, has shown a little bit of warts just at times in this postseason, like any great player does when they're getting all the attention. And then you have Jalen Williams, who has shown really, he's shown that he could be one of the best players on either on the, he could be the best player on the floor. But other than those two, their options are really limited. Is it some Hartenstein, top of the key passing? Is it some, it starts to really dry up. So if that's what I think I saw in game six was that Indiana was able to stop both of them at a time and ratchet up the turnovers. And then once they get the turnovers, that's when their offense is the best. They can go downhill, they can blitz you, they can hit threes, and all of a sudden you're smacked in the mouth. So I do think the first quarter will be huge. Will Shea find his rhythm? Will Jalen Williams be able to, if Shea can't, be the best player on the floor? And that's big. And especially we'll also see the condition of Tyrese Halliburton. How's his leg feeling after some extra time off?
I'll be taking the unders in the first quarter.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think this is going to be a sloppy first quarter. I think no, I mean it's not like many players in the league have are still around from those 2016 Cavs Warriors teams anyway.
Uh-huh.
That being said, neither team's been here before.
Yeah.
And I think the lack of experience, not only in the finals, but also this late in the finals with this much with this stakes, this pressure, this buildup. I think that's going to show in that first quarter. I think it's shown at multiple points in this series. They've come out little first game one, for example.
Hmm.
First quarter came out a little sloppy, hitting the back of the rim. I think that might continue into game seven, bleed in a little bit.
Yeah. We've seen OKC sometimes have to rev it up. They have had to sometimes through attrition, like we've seen them rise and fall this postseason. Does it happen in game? Because they also have the best home crowd in basketball. That's like the closest you have to a college-like crowd. We've seen it since at least from my two eyes, well, really since they became a team, the Durant, Harden, and Westbrook. Like that crowd is amazing because of how small it is, how small market it is. I've been to that arena in a playoff game before. Amazing. Like that's unmatched. And Indiana has some of that too, but 10-2 at home. I think the crowd is also, how do they react to maybe a slow OKC first quarter? That's going to be big too.
Yeah, do they lose faith, or are they like Dagnall, who knows, hey, I have a very deep bench full of guys that can make perimeter stops and hit three pointers.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to cycle through all those guys at the end of this bench, and I'm going to try until somebody starts banging threes and starts making stops and build a lineup out of that.
Yeah, will be fascinating. That first quarter, folks. If you're watching the NBA Finals tomorrow, I wouldn't order a pizza and go get it at the door. Then you're missing a few possessions in the first quarter. I would be buckled up in your seat watching from Jump Street, and that's what Steve and I will be doing. And when we come back, it's time to do our confidence meter segment. We're gonna look at every single guy because of our respect for Game 7. Every guy with two of the deepest teams in the league. Where do we stand, and how can their legacies be defined? In the greatest words in sports, Game 7. More on it when we come back on Sach and the franchise.
And we're back with Sach and the franchise on the Sachi Sports Tapes Network. And we have a very Simmonsified segment for you for your game seven. It's a big moment,
Mm.
and we needed to bring out the big guns. So we're doing a confidence rating draft. We're gonna go. Each team's gonna get their own draft.
Hmm.
So that we're gonna go through each team. You are picking based on how high of confidence you have that this guy's gonna show up for game seven. That's the criteria.
Hmm.
Plain and simple. I
Yeah.
am gonna let the esteemed gentleman from Ridgefield, Connecticut, currently representing Savannah, Georgia, to have the first pick in the Indiana Pacers confidence rating draft, the away team. Who do you think is most likely to show up for a game seven, Mr. Sachi?
Well, this one, it's kind of like those drafts, like when LeBron got picked first in '03. There's not a ton of intrigue, but the texture will continue to come as we go down. And of course, it's Mr. Tyrese Halliburton, the man who choked out the Knicks. He's had one of the best postseason runs, really, in like single guy postseason runs in recent memory. Steve, you fleshed it out a couple episodes ago how him winning a finals and Shea too. We'll get to Shea. Both of them have so much weight if they were to pull this off, because of the fact that they're a lead guard without a top 10 player, and especially if Tyrese pulls this off on the road. Why I have so much confidence in him is that leg's got a little bit more time to heal, and even on one leg, he was still able to command the offense. The numbers aren't going to jump off the page, and I'm going to tease a little bit to a later confidence guy, and the Pacers backup point guard, wink wink helped him kind of. They almost ran like a two quarterback offense in Game 6, and I kind of like more of that in Game 7. With all that being said, I'm very confident that when push comes to shove late in the game, I think he's my number one overall pick, and I'm taking him over Shea in my confidence to show up and have a legacy defining Game 7.
I would also, if I could put money on a shot to take the lead in the last 2 minutes, I would,
Yeah.
because I think he's inevitable. More wins added, more win probability added, I should say, than any other player in any other postseason. Um, he's the man, and he's the obvious number one pick.
Mm.
Um,
And this is where it
I
starts gets tricky, Steve.
this
Where are you
is
going to here?
okay. I think in terms of who's going to show up tomorrow. I think the Great White Hope is showing up tomorrow. I'm taking TJ
Number
McConnell, my
two.
number two on the Pacers.
The guy I teased thinking it would come a little bit later, and it comes right out
No.
the chute.
Well, here's why. Is that I think he is going to be good. He's right now he's averaging 11 in the series. I think he's good for 15 tomorrow.
Hmm.
So I think he's going above his average. I
Yeah.
think tomorrow he is just got all the juice, all the energy, all the chakras are aligned for TJ McConnell to play a little disruptor. There is a player on the Thunder who I have a lot of game seven confidence in
Uh-huh.
that I'm teasing for later that I think could steal this could steal this great white hope title.
Wow.
Who could it be? But we're with TJ, I think what's really interesting is also how he stepped up defensively
Uh-huh.
in game six. And yes, has always been a pest, but not necessarily ability to lock down guys bigger than him. And
Yeah.
that's what changed in game six. And that 2 second 3 point shot could become dangerous.
Hmm.
Um, I just like him to have a nice game. So TJ McConnell, my chips are all in.
It's a heck of a pick. I'm telling you what, you're trying to sway me, and what I love about TJ is his poise. He's been on this team. Him and Miles Turner have been on this team since the bubble Pacers, and TJ McConnell was on the process Sixers. Like he's seen a
Yeah.
lot in the league. He really has. And for him to just go from the process Sixers to now the biggest stage is just awesome in a nutshell. Unfortunately, I'm gonna not pick him second. I have to go with a guy who has a championship ring on his finger, who really showed up in when only in his third year in the NBA in 2019 with the Raptors. That's Pascal Siakam. I sometimes look at this Pacers offense and believe that they should run through him a little bit more. He's been great on both ends of the floor. He's especially in transition. He's been really good. Like when just going back to when the Pacers made this Siakam trade in December of 23. I didn't know how it fit with their flow because I tend to look at him as a guy who plays slower. Kind of has a little bit of Julius Randle in him where he gets the ball in the post and he's a little bit more of a black hole. But in transition, he's been really good. And getting downhill, the Thunder don't have a lot of guys that can kind of contend with him downhill. We'll talk about it later, but Chet's really kind of struggled all over the place. I feel like he's kind of been figured out physically in a lot of different ways. So I do think if there's someone, if Tyrese's leg is a little bit more of an issue, or if our guy TJ is maybe a little bit more stifled, I think Siakam, I think that low post slash high post, I do think that is a really valuable option for them. I think that gives them a huge edge in this game seven.
Siakam got Chet Holmgren on his heels so bad, you know I have to give him the Schumer.
Yeah.
It's really it's difficult.
Yeah.
Siakam's a great go for three on this team. You leave me with interesting options.
Hmm.
You go Turner, you go Nemhard or Mathurin, Neesmith, Toppin. For me,
Oh.
I'm taking the guy that I famously liked out of college, Benedict Mathurin. I
Hmm.
would have taken him like second or third in that draft. I loved the intangibles on Benedict Mathurin,
Wow.
and not necessarily to have the biggest scoring game. I'm not expecting him to knock down four threes. What I am expecting of him is I think he is going to give J-Dub. I think he's going to give a lot of these 3 and D shooters like Aaron Wiggins and Isaiah Joe. I think he's going to get out on those guys and give them fits. I think he's going to play a disruptor role in this game. And that's why I like Matherin in terms of my confidence rating. I'd have to if Halliburton's a 10,
Uh-huh.
where I have no doubt this guy
Yeah.
shows up. McConnell like a 8-9, Siakam 7-8-9, you know, Nemhard or not, excuse me, Matherin. We're now in the sevens. I would say we're distinctly in the sevens, 7 out of 10. I think this guy shows up.
Wow. And I think as we go along, I think it'll be fun to highlight like where we stray from each other. I think we already
Yeah,
strayed from McConnell, Siakam, and I'm not saying that I'm not a McConnell guy. Like I
what's your
said,
confidence rating? Give me what's your 1 to 10? When you disagree,
yeah,
provide me a confidence interval.
gotcha. I like that. I like that. I'm gonna give
New
Tyrese a
rule, new
nine.
rule.
Yeah, I like that.
Sorry I had to give you a Bill Maher new rule.
That's good. I like the Tyrese at 9.5. Really, the leg is the only thing I'm worried about. Because he still only got to play 23 minutes, and I know they blew him out in game six, so hasn't been tested maybe as much as a grueling game seven. Siakam, I'm liking his two-way presence, and that's the defense is what's been really a sleeper. I'm gonna give him an 8.5, and how big he is sometimes compared to guys like Chet and even Hartenstein, who has his Turner problems to deal with. And then McConnell's just an 8, just because I still hold him in really high regard and just his poise. And he's really been there before. And the fact that he's not afraid at all to get really scrappy. I think that's the thing why people love him so much. Next up, no, folks, it's not Obi Toppin as a former Knicks fan. In my book, I'm picking next up Andrew Nemhard, and this is only because his late game fearlessness is big in my book. I look at him as a guy who you look at game one, that ridiculous double step back three that he made late in the game that probably deserved a bang out of Mike Breen. That was an unbelievable, and he has not shown, I think, just the fearlessness. In game sevens, we've seen it. You need guys who are just fearless, and I do think if Halliburton's a little just a step slower and McConnell's not necessarily the guy who's going to put the ball on the deck all the time, I could see Nemhard. It kind of for me is in between Siakam and Nemhard for who gets a lot more of the shots. But I do think his fearlessness, if he can generate enough from the perimeter, I like him as the next man up in my confidence rankings, just because pure fearlessness. We talked about it in the A block, Steve, just how much respect we have for Game Seven, and I think he's got a lot of Game Seven-ish chops in his repertoire. Would you agree?
I would agree. I also like in terms of like a fantasy term like usage in terms of
Yeah.
I think where he is in the offense in terms of like if they are able to shut down Halliburton early, which has been the case for much of this series, I
Hmm.
think often they turn to Nemhard who
Yeah.
just gets them points to keep them in the game.
Right.
And in terms of confidence, I'm confident he can play that role in the middle of the game too.
Yeah.
Uh, Not just like he's got that edge to kind of carry the team when no one else is really knocking down things. So I like Nemhard for that. I think for me though, there's a guy I value a little more,
Mm.
and I I hate to do it to you.
Uh-oh.
I really do.
Is it number one out of Brooklyn, New York?
I think it's number one from the Dayton Flyers.
Oh man.
Obi Toppin, yamming on your coffin.
Yeah.
This is This is an incredible,
Yeah.
incredible finals run he's had,
Hmm.
and I know you want to talk about comparisons
Yeah.
for him, uh, but I think in terms of my confidence, I'm very confident he's going to get a great block against the glass or swatted on the baseline tomorrow. I'm
Yeah.
very confident he's averaging 12 and at 12.8 this series. I'm confident he can get to 13. I would say I'm 6.5 out of 10 confident that Obi Toppin can, more confident than not, that Obi can get to 13 and make a big impact on this game. So I know bringing up Obi,
Yeah.
it's a lot of conflicted emotions for you. Would
Yes,
you like to
absolutely.
elaborate on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, a lot, our I think our texts back and forth are always worth mentioning on the podcast because it shows you, the fans, where our heads are at. And a lot of the time I'm texting Steve about Obi. Like, it wasn't just in game six when Obi was the leading scorer with 20 off the bench. It wasn't just when he dunked on the Knicks in OT in game one in the Eastern Conference semifinals. I've been tracking this Obi thing for a while. I couldn't stand the trade when it happened. And now that he's really become a guy, like a guy, and again, when we talk about game seven, like it really gets boiled down to the purest forms of basketball. One thing, he has the best athleticism of he's up there with some of the best guys in the league. When you look at his ability to leap off the out of the gym and his offensively, he's on a perfect roll with this team. And so that's a factor too. Like you talked about, a big block, like energy plays, like he's in a perfect role. And it got me thinking, like, when was the last time that a team like the Knicks, who were in contention, gave away a lottery pick to a huge rival, and he's beaten them in two straight postseasons? And I'm not saying he's been like the best player on the floor every time, but he's been a huge part of them not advancing. He's been prohibitive in them achieving their goals, and they gave him away for a second round pick and a future second round pick, not even any players in return. And I know it was part of salary cap stuff, and it was a lot of it was to sign OG Anunoby, and I get that it's the NBA. But really, it's such a rare circumstance. And what adds salt to my wound, Steve, as someone who loves New York and loves the Knicks, Obi grew up a Knicks fan. He was born in Brooklyn, and I didn't love the pick at the time. I wanted guys like Halliburton who were on the board, and I didn't think he translated well to the NBA. But he's proven me wrong. He's been a great guy, and just really, I was looking around, like, when was the last time a trade like this happened? And a big contributor on the NBA Finals teams has been just a cast-off lottery pick. And it's less than you think. I couldn't really find any. Derek White came to mind, but he was a 29th pick, and even he was traded for a first-round pick. Like, my criteria is really small. It's former lottery pick that you just give up on. You trade for almost nothing, then vanquishing you twice in a row. Rui Hachimura, I know, is outside of the criteria, but he was another interesting guy who he was just traded for three second round picks and Kendrick Nunn. But even that's a lot more than the Knicks got for Obi. I mean, the Knicks pretty much salary dumped Obi, and he's been a thorn in their side. And that's where emotionally, like every part of this, I can't stand. And a lot of it comes from Tibbs too. Like Tibbs and him had a public. There was that audio that was leaked after the 2023 season during the playoffs where he pretty much said Tibbs had no idea how to coach. So like a lot of this, there's a lot of deep-rooted stuff. And Obi and Tibbs, that probably gave the Knicks no leverage because everyone knew that they had no, it was a bad system for them. The Knicks played slow, the Pacers play fast. Like, maybe both things can be true and he just needed a new home. But the fact that the Pacers are the new home and it couldn't be somewhere like Sacramento, that's where it just becomes so tough for me. And I do have high confidence in him as well. Like you said, Steve, an energy block, a putback dunk, like his pure athleticism is awesome. And he's on a perfect team and he's got the confidence now. He's a guy who swings very highly on confidence. I saw him in his first 3 years in New York where he would have good stretches and terrible stretches. A lot of it was based upon how he played the night before. I'm really thinking he can have he could be a game seven riser and it would just pour more salt in my wound. Anyway, please,
I have some comps for you. I have some
please
comps
do.
for you.
Please do.
Okay. So the first three do not fit your lottery pick
Uh-huh.
criteria that were given away. There's something wrong with all three of it, but they're close.
Uh-huh.
Danny Green was drafted by the Cavs
Yeah.
in the second round and then waived.
Yeah.
And then the Spurs picked him. the Spurs picked him up. Also, that pick was like a part of like the crazy three-team trade that Delonte West and Sersbiak got on the Cavs from.
Uh,
So like Danny Green was thrown around the NBA and then it ended up becoming like this vital piece in this perfect scenario
uh,
in San Antonio. Not to mention that if he would have been a great teammate for LeBron as a spot up off-ball
Absolutely.
shooter.
Yeah.
Um,
And was in 2020. We saw it happen in the bubble.
yep. And then so you also have Bill Walton traded from the Clippers for the corpse of Cedric Maxwell
Uh,
and no disrespect to Sir Cedric and a first round draft pick that was Arvydas Sabonis who ended up getting traded that those rights got traded to Portland by the time he came to the NBA. So Bill Walton ended up becoming a huge part of the 86 Celtics and that championship run.
mhm.
Um, Jason Terry traded from the Hawks to Dallas
Uh,
a few years before that championship for Antoine Walker and Tony Delk.
yeah.
Great trade, guys.
Yeah.
But I have one lottery pick
Uh,
who was on a team that is now contending, and then was thrown around for nothing, and became a vital piece on a almost championship team.
hmm.
And that's going to be Cameron Payne.
Interesting. Oh, Cameron Payne.
Cameron Payne was drafted with the 14th pick in 2015 by the Oklahoma City Thunder. He was then traded along with nothing else for Taj Gibson,
Remember that
just a
trade?
salary dump for Taj Gibson and Doug McDermott, and the pick that ended up being Mitchell Robinson.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then he's waived by the Bulls, 10-day with the Cavs, free agent with the Raptors, waived by the Raptors, goes to the Suns, and ends up being a vital part of that Suns team.
Yeah.
So I'm taking Campaign as my Obi Toppin comparison. The OKC fans a couple years ago, when they might have been, able to start making contention. I bet you they really would have liked Campaign to kind
Yeah.
of be that extra burst off the bench.
Yeah. That's good. Those are good comps. It's just it's hard, The Brooklyn thing makes it,
I feel like a psychiatrist, man.
I
I feel
know.
when you were letting out, I felt like you were just lying on that chaise lounge.
Gosh, the Brooklyn thing makes it really hard because he grew up a Knicks fan. He was drafted by the Knicks. He loved the Knicks. Again, I didn't
He's
love the
also went to college in the Midwest. He also went to so tell yourself that. Tell yourself that he was always bound to
yeah,
want to continue his wonderful collegiate career because he kind of peaked in college, even though he's peaking right now.
yeah,
He was also National Player of the Year and would
yeah,
have he wanted to finish what could have been with after COVID cut him short. So he always had to go back to the Midwest. Tell
yeah.
yourself that.
Yeah, it's good. And like you said when we introduced him, like my relationship with Obi is really complicated because I still love the guy. Like he was in the Tibbs gulag for a long time and bad fit and it's good to see him flourishing and I kind of expected this when the trade happened. He's a good lob threat for Halliburton and to put a bow on Obi's conversation, if he has a great game seven and the Pacers win, who I am rooting for the Pacers, I would be very happy for Obi. And it would kind of also vindicate my feelings and kind of vindicate this Tibbs firing too. So there's texture, there's layers to all this stuff. There always is, as for me and my sports fandom. So I guess it's on me. I was gonna pick Obi next as well, but to bring up somebody else in the mix here. Aaron Nesmith is just next in the confidence meter as a guy who's going to play. I don't think he's going to be a guy who wilts, is what I'm going to say. I think he's having a solid postseason, and that's where I stand with him. I'm not going to expect him to jump off the page, but he's been a guy who's consistently. Well, really, in the Knicks series, he had some of the greatest shots in Pacers history. So he does have that potential. So maybe I also bank on that a little bit more as a guy who, hey, game seven, he's shown, I know it was only a game one and all that, but he pretty much resurrected from the Pacers. He was a huge part of a very historic comeback. So more Knicks salt in my wounds. But what do you think about that Neesmith pick right
He
there?
has finals experience. He was on
Hmm.
22 Celtics team that made it
Yeah,
to the finals. He's
good
not
point.
that he's been here before, but he's been in big games before against
Yeah,
really, really tough teams. I would have taken Neesmith there. You're leaving me with an interesting choice.
yeah.
Do I go with Miles Turner, who is probably spending this evening staying up late building Legos? Or do I go with the man with the caterpillar on his upper lip Ben Shepherd, and that's what I'm doing.
Nice.
We're now below for me. We've now reached the five demarcation. I am less confident than I am confident
Mm.
that these players are going to show up. So I'm going to take Ben Shepherd. I think 4 times out of 10, Ben Shepherd does something really cool. Maybe like good for 9 points or something like that.
Yeah.
Like he's averaging three, maybe he triples it or something, really surprises us.
Yeah, I like that. I think his ceiling is higher as a guy who generates stuff from the wing. I would go with Turner. I've always feel like I've been higher on Turner than others have, just because his interior defense has been solid, and I know his shooting has been up and down as a five. But at the end of the day, I think his rim protection is really undervalued, and I'm still pretty confident. I think sometimes his shooting comes at the expense of his defense, and that's why it fluctuates. And in matchups, we don't really see him do much at all offensively, and it kind of feels like he's stuck on an island on offense, and they really kind of make him shoot. But I think, like I mentioned with McConnell, he's been on this Pacers team forever, and he was a guy who was in trade rumors. He stuck it out. I think we talk about the intangibles of Game Sevens and the purest form of basketball. This is a guy who survived a lot of rumors and a lot of weird stuff in Indiana where it looked like maybe he was in between two different rebuilds and in between two different timelines, and he played with PG as a youngster, and he's still here. So I kind of I still would put him more confident than not that he's going to have a solid game. I don't think he's going to be someone who's going to have a legacy defining game. That's why he's lower on both of our lists. But I like what he does for Indiana, and I'm pretty high on him actually, than more than maybe my draft picks would suggest right now.
I wouldn't say I'm high on him. I'd say I'm high on how much he's gonna get this offseason. He's gonna get a great
Hmm.
contract, a
Yeah.
well-deserved big contract this offseason. Uh, but I don't expect much from him tomorrow, and I wouldn't be surprised if they have to turn to their less than desirable centers like Thomas Bryant or Tony Bradley, who
Hmm.
I am not gonna pick because I actually have more confidence in James Johnson than I have in anybody else left.
Wow.
If they need him, he's going to do what James Johnson does. So I have confidence. I actually have 10 out of 10 confidence
Yeah.
that James Johnson is going to do exactly what James Johnson does, which is get ejected from that game
Yeah.
and get the boys fired up.
Yeah.
So if he were to play, James Johnson, not right there for my confidence rating.
Wow.
So
Good.
for you, you have left Thomas Bryant, Tony Bradley, and Johnny Furphy.
That's a great pick because even if he records 0 minutes, that guy is extremely valuable. If things get a little heated into game seven, if there's a
Yeah.
hard foul, he's there. And so that's he's really valuable. He wouldn't be in the league for almost 15 years if he was. You know what I mean? That's a great pick. For my next one, I'm gonna go Thomas Bryant. Kind of the similar fearlessness example I made earlier. Yeah, he's a guy who's gonna
LeBron.
for those of you listening only, two iconic shots in NBA history: LeBron having most points ever, and Tyrese Halliburton sinking the Knicks, or was it one of the other shots that Tyrese made? He's called for the ball. So I kind of, you know what, Steve? I kind of like him as a wild card. Like offense is drying up for Indy. He might come in and kind of make some things happen. He's made some threes. He had a big game against the Knicks. I
I know
kind of
if
like him as
he
a wild card guy.
if he makes a three, I might have to go for a walk
Yeah,
because
yeah,
I might that is gonna that would do shambles. One of the worst things that ever happened to Oklahoma City would be a Thomas Bryant three in the fourth quarter of this game.
yeah. Maybe it's in front of his own bench or in front of the opponent bench, and like, I look, I kind of like him as
I
he's a
hate
vet.
it.
He's been
I hate it.
around. I kind of like him as like now I'm kind of talking myself into perhaps maybe I mean there was some Thomas Bryant buzz earlier in the postseason. I'm kind of sneaking my way into I could see him making an impact. I think Carlisle might find ways to deploy him against like a bench unit, and I'm sneaking my way in there. I'm dipping my toes in the hot tub of Thomas Bryant Island. I might be, as Bill would say, I might be looking at timeshares here. They're really low rate right now. No one's really going out there for vacation in July and June, but I'm thinking about it.
Uh,
Sorry, you're really left on the scrap heap. One thing I can say, Steve,
yeah, I'm at a
I
really
would
tough spot. I'm
would you
taking
have
Tony.
picked Bryant over Tony Bradley in two centers that they've been going to?
I would have because while I'm not confident in Thomas Bryant, I could very well see the worst case scenario in which that's the hero of game seven.
Uh-huh.
So more so than Tony Bradley, who I think is more likely to be the candidate for someone who Carlisle substitutes in and allows a rebound over his back, similar to like the Diaz situation where Diaz in the game instead of Duncan
Yeah,
in the last part of Game 6, 2013, and allows for Bosch back out at Allen.
yeah, yeah,
Uh, so I would that would be my confidence is that Tony Bradley could get a couple rebounds, but more likely will get boxed out by one of the Williamses that are the big men for the Thunder,
yeah,
or Hartenstein,
yeah, yeah. I think,
or someone smaller,
yeah.
Like I mean, not a lot of not like this is an intimidating big man. We are pick 12 out of 13 on the Indiana bench.
Yeah.
Which by the way, this Indiana bench, I just want to hit you with a quick stat. The third most scoring all-time bench in the playoffs.
Wow.
Um, they have 816 points. They've outscored the 16 Warriors bench, the 85 Lakers bench.
Wow.
Um, they are only behind the 84 Lakers bench and the 14 Spurs bench, which has
Mm.
over 100 more points than any other bench has in NBA history.
Wow.
So that's a legendary bench. But Manu Ginobili, what are you going to do?
Yeah. Wow. And the likes of Gary Neal getting hot against, I mean, Miami and Danny Green, and wow. What a stat. What a great stat.
The Thunder bench, by the way, is just behind the 11 Mavericks bench, and better than like some really nice benches like the 20 Lakers and the 88 Pistons. You know, the Thunder bench has played really well. Caruso's their highest leading scorer off the bench.
Wow.
So you were left with Johnny Furphy. What's your confidence rating on Johnny Furphy if he has to get in the game?
You
One to ten.
know,
One.
I'll say this, when he was in a couple of garbage time appearances, he's kind of played, I mean, I'm now using this term more loosely, but he's kind of, he kind of flies around. I mean, I would be pretty shocked if he were to.
The Furphy piece, you'd be shocked if we see the if there's a
Yeah.
Furphy piece
Contrary
in
to Thomas Bryant, I don't think I'm spending any time looking at, timeshares on Johnny Furphy Island, but the least I can say about him is he's an athletic big dude, and like I think in the future he's kind of like a good Carlisle project guy. But yeah, I would be shocked if he enters the ball game, but he is a guy who can really fly around out there. I can tell you that. He's an athletic, quick guy who theoretically can shoot.
We'll see which one of these guys that we've just drafted amongst our little mini teams of Pacers end up becoming the kind of X factor in tomorrow's game. But really, really interesting stuff with Indiana. You know, Rick Carlisle is actually th going to think about using all these guys.
Yes. Yeah, even Johnny.
And there will be situations where each one of these guys pop into his brain as a possible solution,
Uh,
and it'll be really interesting to see the lineups he presents on the floor, and you know which one of these guys they have 8 guys averaging double digits in the
mm,
finals.
that's
That's
a
really
great
impressive.
number. Yeah,
And and so which one of these guys is gonna step up amongst the rest? Because almost all of them have had a game.
that's right.
So it's really really going to be interesting. Uh, as for the Thunder, I think we'll tease that one to the next block right here. But I think there's a lot of interesting things with the Thunder. I don't have confidence in a player that I think you probably have a lot more confidence in,
Mm.
and I think there are some bench guys here that are really explosive and have major potential for Game 7 heroics.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say about I think the more that we've talked about this, Steve, the more I'm kind of talking myself into Indiana actually being in a good spot. I mean, they have more. It seems like they have more options at this moment in time, and they have, in my opinion, a Hall of Fame coach that is going to pick these options. And as much as Mark
I agree.
Dagnall's, yeah, he's done a great job, but he has not been on the stage. He's a younger guy, and I do think it's going to be a question of, is the immense home court advantage for OKC? Is their great defense gonna outnumber what the Pacers can give you optionality wise? Because I think that's going to be really fun to watch.
I couldn't be more excited, and yet we still have more podcasts left.
Right.
You're listening to Sach and the Franchise on the Sachi Sports Takes Network. We'll be right back.
The Game 7 confidence ratings draft rolls on. We just did an awesome one on the Indiana Pacers, who, as we talked about, have a lot of fascinating decisions, but maybe even more so with the Thunder, the team people are calling one of the deepest, maybe some of the deepest of all time. Lots of choices for head coach Mark Dagnall to make, and we're going to act like we're coach on this part of the podcast, Steve. I batted leadoff for the Pacers and picked Tyrese Halliburton. I'm going to give you the leadoff spot, and when we go from pure confidence to how much the player is going to show up in Game 7, that is the cut and dry criteria. Maybe there's some intrigue here. A lot of people probably know who you're going to pick. Without further ado, who are you most confident in to have a legacy defining type of Game 7, or at least make an impact?
I'm gonna go with an 8.5 rating
Uh-huh.
on Shea Gilgeous-Alexander.
Wow.
It was a tough decision for a second for me, to be
Uh-huh.
honest,
Uh-huh. I saw
because
you, yeah.
I think J-Dub really presents a lot of uniquely interesting matchup problems for most defenses.
Uh-huh.
I don't think at this point in the series the Pacers are one of those defenses, though. I think that the Pacers are going to have more trouble stopping Shea from doing his push-off stuff,
Yeah.
from working that mid-range game, from just being a complete heliocentric masterpiece late in the game.
Yeah.
So that would be my biggest worry if I'm Coach Carlisle, and if I'm Daignault, that's who you most need to get going. So,
Mm.
a pretty obvious pick, but at the same time, you got to give him his flowers. The guy's averaging 30 in the finals.
Yeah.
He's doing things. He's got us 2 steals a game, a block and a half a game. He's
Mm.
really stepped it up defensively, which
Yeah.
is really awesome to see
Yeah.
because that was one of the things you needed from him to kind of consider him to be uh, an elite player worthy of an MVP when it comes to how we view him historically.
Yeah. Yeah. I would also have gone with Shea. Like you, Steve, giving it some thought. But at the end of the day, league MVP, has a chance to enter some rarefied air if the Thunder win tomorrow night. And Jalen Williams is a very close number two for me, just because, what we talked about earlier, Steve, like, I feel like the Shea stuff, maybe Carlisle's just kind of figured out. He just hasn't played too well, and there's some Harden in him where the free throw reliance has dried up a little bit. That the Pacers have seemed to figure out, and the referees have kind of figured out. Like, just as an aside, I think as an NBA fandom, we've done a great job of one we've more so than ever, the fans have more influence in league play now because of Twitter. Like, I'm just gonna say it.
Yeah.
Like, the logos on the court happened in game two because there was an outcry, and then they were taken off because there was an outcry over that. There was an outcry about how bad these crews have been, like with Doris Burke and Richard Jefferson, and then they were on the hot seat. Like, things have kind of the fingers on the pulse big time. And one thing the finger has been on the pulse on too is the Shea foul baiting after some of these playoff games that people have been in uproar, even casual fans to have tuned in with it. So I think that's kind of affected Shea in bits, especially as his finals has gone on. And we always know, Steven, in game seven, the whistles will be swallowed up a little more. The league doesn't want guys fouling out in the last game of the year. And referees are it's going to be physical. There's the most of the world at stake.
I heard Scott Foster is going to be on the
Uh-oh.
call. So does that is game 8 in play?
Yeah. It's just like, the 1906 World Series where the Red Sox played game eight due to darkness. Whatever year that was, they played in game eight due to darkness.
With Scotty on the whistle, it could happen.
Yeah.
Believe me.
The extender. Um,
No, I couldn't agree more with Shay. The only thing that's troubling for me is his turnover percentage kind of skyrocketing throughout this,
mhm,
and it might be a little bit heavily weighted to that game 6 performance, but
mhm.
it's sitting at like almost 13% right now. That's a little troublesome in a game where things might get shaky for a while.
Yeah.
Though that can put you out of the game quickly.
Yeah.
That's why for me he's an 8.5 and not the 9.5, 10 range that Tyrese is in, where I will be shocked if his shots aren't falling. I
Yeah.
will genuinely be shocked.
Yeah. And
Shay, I could see a reality where it gets a little bottled up.
Yeah.
Starts
And
turning the
the
ball
last
over.
note, sorry, the last note for me on Shea would be they've kind of figured out his footwork. Like the Pacers have really grinded on how to like because his footwork is so unique and he's got longs and he's so long and the foul stuff, it makes it hard. I think over the course of the regular season, but now that there's been the most tape possible on this guy in his MVP campaign, I think the Pacers have kind of figured out like his footwork and the spots he doesn't like to be in. Like he doesn't like to be forced into the post. He likes to face up and kind of get ahead of steam, or at least try to step back. Like the Thunder have the Pacers have forced him to kind of post. They've given some doubles. They've hedged a lot, and that's where Jalen Williams, our number two guys, I think for both of us, has been great early in the series, especially really pretty much before Game 6 when he had that just ceremonious Game 5 where he was starting to do the stuff that makes him great. Some of his angles on his layups are unbelievable through contact. He can really generate a lot from the perimeter, and so that's why he's a really close number two for me. I think it's now you are up for a really interesting third banana here. I mean this is as close to a toss-up as I think any NBA Finals team might have in terms of who's their number three confidence guy right now.
I teased it earlier,
Mhm.
and it's specifically because of one aspect of his game. Actually, I'm going to change it. I'm going to leave
Ooh,
that player on the
ooh, a little
board
little dicey,
because
little
I
toss
because
up.
I have more I just have more confidence in this player. It's Lou Dort.
Yeah.
Lou Dort's my third most confident guy. He doesn't turn the ball over.
Uh-huh.
He one of those, at least not one, two of those absolutely insane missile threes. Missile. One of those missile threes is gonna go in though.
Uh-huh.
Those things arc like crazy, and
Yeah.
you're gonna have the whole finals. I wouldn't be surprised if it happens late. If a Lou Dort three happens late, and
Mm.
the whole arena
Yeah.
sits there in suspense as this long arcing shot goes. I am 7 out of 10 confident that Lou Dort will show up tomorrow.
I
So
love
so he is right below. I believe, and also defensively, he is early in the game. He is going to give Tyrese fits. He is going to give Neesmith and Nemhard fits.
hmm
He's going to make those guys work for their buckets. So I changed my pick in my head,
hmm
uh, but I think I love Lou Dort for tomorrow.
Great pick. Again, like, talk about experience, how much I love experience in game sevens. And I think every coach would tell you the same thing. Another guy who's been with this franchise for a long time, pre-Bubbles years, he was on that team in 2020 in the bubble that forced the Rockets to a game seven, and was pretty much forced in that series to shoot threes. And honestly, even in this finals, he's shooting threes almost 52%. So, no, he's not shooting the threes that, say, Jalen Williams are going to shoot, but uh, really interesting to see that. And also, you think about great point, Steve, with the way he's used on offense, he never is going to turn the ball over, but he averages over a steal a game. So he's a possession winner and a defensive force. And that's a great third pick. And it kind of leads me to the fourth pick here. Do I pick a guy like Caruso who's similar? Or do I go with Chet Holmgren, who has really seemed out of sorts the past couple games, but has a decent enough track record as just pure talent then maybe he picks it up. And I'm not going to go there. I got to go with Alex Caruso because of the physical nature of Game Sevens, because of his experience as well, winning a bubble and winning a championship in the bubble in 2020. If I'm going to keep speaking about that season, this is a guy who's been there, done that, and I think the gritty, grinded out nature of Game Sevens really plays in the hands of guys like Dort and Caruso. And we talked about it last time in the last block how the Pacers have so many guys who can get hot from three. These two hold the keys to stop all of that and really kind of put a damper on what the Pacers want to do. So I'm kind of loving. Oops, Steve, I still got you, Stevie.
Oh yeah, yes
Okay,
sir.
good, good. Sorry, a little false alarm there. I don't know if you agree with me there, but I'm going Caruso right after Lou Dort because of how a Game Seven plays into those types of players' hands.
That was the tease I had.
Mm,
I think Caruso has the ability tomorrow. Should he do, should he play a full all-around game
mm,
and McConnell not show up and Holmgren and Hartenstein continue to do what they've been doing this whole series,
yeah.
I think I think Caruso could grab the Great White Hope belt again and take it until Flag gets into the league at least. Because here's my thing with Caruso is potentially tomorrow what I think and what hasn't been done a ton this series is I think he's going to be thrown on the Siakam. I think they're going to replicate what they did to Jokic in Game
Uh-huh.
7 against the Nuggets.
Wow.
And that was an absolute mind altering experience for
Yeah.
it was like Jokic was in the jungle doing ayahuasca with Aaron Rodgers was how he was playing. He Caruso does special things defensively on guys that are bigger than him and stronger than him. And
Hmm.
I think if he's able to force Siakam into more post-up scenarios instead of like kind of crashing towards the rim
Yeah.
without a guy right on him, like he, I really enjoy Caruso's game. And I think also his experience with those bubble Lakers, with big teams, with playing with LeBron,
Uh,
having to, do a carry job and not that he was carrying the team, but like that Chicago team's pretty lean that
uh,
he was playing on earlier this year. So I I go Caruso there too. You're leaving me with a tough pick here,
yeah. This
which
is
is,
interesting.
there's Aaron Wiggins, Kason Wallace maybe. Holmgren is probably the more obvious. I say no. I go Hartenstein.
Wow.
Know his name,
Wow.
Stephen A. Smith. You'll know his name after tomorrow. I
Uh-huh.
think there's like a five out of 10 chance you'll know his name after tomorrow because I think his top of the key playmaking
Yeah.
was really interesting when the Thunder pulled that out.
Hmm.
And I would like to see them do that again, maybe with like J-Dub working off ball with pick and rolls, trying to get him or Shea open off ball, crashing towards the rim, getting them easy looks without, a ton of putting in a ton of like dribbles. Um, yeah, I just like Hartenstein's ability to do that at least. Uh, I think we're getting to something here, which is neither of us are very confident in Chet Holmgren,
Hmm.
and it's been something that's been festering throughout the finals.
Mm.
That he Chet Holmgren needs to step up, says Kendrick Perkins. But he does. Like he literally he's been playing like Gumby out there, and there's you know I just don't love a lot of what he's been doing. I don't like a lot of the looks he's been getting.
Hmm.
The only thing that benefits him tomorrow is the matchups might benefit him. Is
Hmm.
that having him on the floor in non-Miles Turner minutes and you're doing things to Siakam, you're working Siakam, and that might open some things up for him, especially if Siakam goes on Jalen Williams for stretches
Hmm.
and trying to exploit some sort of thing there, trying to get him on the court when Tony Bradley's on the court, when some of these lesser centers are on the court. You got to maximize the most out of Holmgren. But I have more faith in Hartenstein and Dort and Caruso and the two stars than Chet.
I mean, I like the Hartenstein pick, another former Nick who is really having a great postseason.
But
And
you couldn't afford what the Thunder paid him is simply unaffordable,
yep,
and
yep,
it's bad. It's objectively a bad contract.
yeah.
I don't mean to be this. I don't mean to be in our nice Game 7 preview, but it's objectively not a great contract long term
Yeah,
for what this team, especially if this is where they're reaching and this is where he's reaching.
yeah.
You see what I'm putting down?
I do. And he hasn't, there's some games where he just hasn't played much. It's and some matchups just don't factor him in too much. And also it's a weird CBA loophole where the Knicks couldn't pay him nearly as much as the Thunder could. But I would have picked Chet over Isaiah only because the track record I think is enough. And I look at this Thunder group, and outside of the two top dogs, like I mentioned at the start of our show, Steve, I don't have much confidence. And maybe Chet's just a guy who can take shots, and he's really struggling from the field, especially in the last two games.
12% from three
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
finals.
I mean, it's been interesting. The only things that I think redeem him are his help defensibility. The fact is he's still huge and he does clog a lot of things up for Indiana. And also this team, when Indiana gets playing fast, it's hard for him to recover sometimes. And that's where I think If Indiana's at their best and they're getting downhill and they're ping-ponging the ball around, it's tough. If this is more of a classic game seven or it's more in the half court, I think it'll help him a little bit defensively. Offensively, I don't know really. I don't have too much confidence in him, but I think I have to put him above guys like Wiggins, Wallace. Just I have to. I eventually he's like one of those draft fallers that eventually has to be taken. It doesn't mean like I think my confidence meter in him offensively is like a 4. I just think his defense is like a 6.5, and I think how he defends without fouling to me is still good for the Thunder. I think that's why he's still playing a lot. Like he wouldn't be on the floor if he was a liability on that end, but his offense I think has become that's also another thing we got to look at early, Steve. If he's really awful offensively and the Thunder are really they need points and they're starting five with Caruso and Dort and no one's really scoring, then maybe we might see him not play much at all. Maybe we see more Hartenstein. Maybe we see more, other Jalen. Like maybe we see totally different things we haven't seen all postseason. I think a lot hinges. I know we're going first take territory, but a lot hinges on Holmgren offensively because that'll really affect kind of how we talk about the rest of these guys. I think the rest of these guys we cover are going to be affected by Chet Holmgren's play.
I couldn't agree more. I think the shooters we cover are looking for him to try to get more focus defensively, try to get guys to take another step or two towards him, get people more space. I think the other big men are going to be needed if he's not playing well early in this game. And I think we'll get to that we'll get to them. I think I'm going to go with a shooter here.
Mm,
But there are the other Jalen Williams, JAY, is shooting really well in the finals. I'm gonna go for a different guy shooting really well. I'm going with Isaiah Joe here. I think
mm,
Isaiah Joe can bang down a couple threes.
good pick. He's a guy who um, hasn't, he had a
Four and a half out of
DNP.
10 confidence. 4.5 out of 10. We're
Yeah.
below five now.
I like that. I like that pick because he had one DNP in this finals and has had a few of those in this postseason. But he's one of those guys that has been a consistent shooter. And maybe, like we've been talking about, maybe the Thunder need some more spacing and they go to him as an option. I mean, I think on any other team he would be getting more consistent burn. It just kind of shows you how much depth the Thunder have. I like that pick. I'm gonna go somebody who the Thunder really hit on from the jump. I mean, this guy was a 55th overall pick that the Thunder have just developed. I mean, not only you think about all the draft picks that they've accrued over the years, but a guy that hit on really late. And that's Aaron Wiggins. I'm picking him because of his two-way ability. He's a guy who has had a few moments in this postseason, and like I talked about it with Indiana, there's a fearlessness aspect. He hasn't exactly been amazing in this playoffs, but he's another I think shooter that I think has a little more size than Joe that maybe Dagnall will turn to because of he's a little bit of a better defender than Joe. So I would guess maybe that's what gives him maybe a leg up over guys like even Case and Wallace, who I'm a little bit lower on. Who's only 21, who's only 6'1". I think Wiggins is just pure size, might help plug some more holes in this game seven.
I have one little thing against Aaron Wiggins, and
Mm.
that's that he turns the ball over 18% of the time.
Yeah,
That's not
coaches hate that
that's
in Indiana.
why I avoided him, to
Yeah.
be honest with you. I think in game sevens, uh turnovers can really wreck a game so quickly. And I think that every possession is so under such a microscope
Mm.
that those types of things can put a player to the bench pretty quickly.
Mm.
So I
Good
would
point.
put my confidence for Aaron Wiggins for reference, probably about a 2.5, I'd say.
Wow. Wow.
I'm down on him. Similar to Chet, where I'm down to Chet, probably like a 3 on Chet.
Yeah.
Versus I think right here, another guy I'd say about a 3 range, 3.5. Case and Wallace.
Mm.
I just I've always liked the way he plays.
Yeah, he's a fun
I
player. Spark
He's a
plug.
fun player. I enjoy his like playmaking ability, kind of just the way he like moves the ball around the court. I think he might just be at some point if they need a fresh look,
Hmm.
putting Case on Wallace in at point and sitting Shea, getting Shea a quick 2-minute breather.
Mm.
I think that might present some interesting, scenarios for them. So we're kind of down to the part of the guys that haven't gotten enough time yet in the finals
Mhm.
to really say whether or not specifically matchup wise to kind of say what they'll be able to do. But you kind of just are looking at the profile of the player
Yeah.
and say, what are we? Kason Wallace has been played enough minutes, I'd say, in the finals actually, but
Yeah.
you get my point.
Yeah, I know. I like that pick. You kind of talked me into him a little bit because of just his pure, like we've seen so many times in game sevens, teams just need offense. The teams tend to just struggle offensively. Even, think about the last game seven of the finals we've talked about, 2016. It was a low scoring game with two of some of the best offenses we've seen, especially Golden State. So I will say that you've talked me into him a little bit. I think just because his minutes have been trending up. I'm liking what Kenrich Williams brings to the table. Just because I'm just looking now. Like you said, we're looking at player profiles. We're looking at Dagnall's patterns. This is a guy who barely played in game two, but his minutes have trended up from 8 to 2 to 11 to 11 to 18 the other night, where he played actually a good amount in. Now you could argue it was in garbage time, but I think Dagnall's kind of prepared him for a little bit more of a role. He's a pretty solid rebounder, and he's a guy who I think, like I said, if Chet struggles, I think I'm kind of hinging a lot of my takes here on Chet's presumed struggles on offense, and I think he's a guy who will give them just another solid defensive body who can kind of give them if they end up turning to Hartenstein at the five and are kind of maybe struggling to have a little more of help defensibility with Chet. I think Williams is a solid enough body. I do like what he brings to the table, and his rebound rate's pretty high this postseason. So
I, I
I
like
just kind
Kenrich
of pulled
too.
for
I,
him.
I like him to play a part in this game.
Yeah,
I think we're both on the same page with Holmgren being a big question mark in this.
yeah,
And that's why I'm going to go right here. A guy, an Arkansas Razorback, shooting
yeah.
750 from three this series, 3 for 4. Uh, the Jalen Williams, the other Jalen. Maybe tomorrow people stop saying the other Jalen. Maybe
hmm
people say J.A. Weiland.
hmm
People say something, give him some sort of nickname after tomorrow because I think there's a decent chance in the absence of Holmgren in those minutes, if especially if the Pacers have some sort of solution for the Hartenstein playmaking in
Yeah.
around the 3-point line above the free throw line. Um, I think Jalen might come in and maybe have a few baseline lobs, maybe be able to get some fire started. Who knows, man? I think we're at the who knows part of the
hmm
bench.
Yeah, yeah. And I was gonna go.
I also like him in the interviews. I like it. I think he's like a big like from the interviews I can tell that like he's a big part of the team. Like he's important on the team.
Yeah,
So that's why I take Jaylin Williams.
I was gonna say the exact same thing, and I'm so happy you said that because he's a guy who I think to to purify this, like to boil this down a little bit, I think whatever impact, if he does make an impact, I think it'll be beyond his numbers because, like you said, he is a huge part of this team from an energy standpoint, from a icon standpoint, from the guys are going to get hyped up even when his name is called standpoint. His minutes have fluctuated this whole postseason. Did play his most minutes in the finals the other night as well. So again, I'm trending towards. He didn't even play in game five, and then had ended up playing and wasn't active. I'm sorry, he didn't play in game four, wasn't even active on the reserves for game five. So he wasn't one of the 13 active players out of 15. But then in game six, he ends up playing 12 minutes and plays pretty solid and gets some opportunity. So I think he's a guy who, if his name is called, I think that gives the crowd a boost. We've talked about the crowd a lot, and I think it gives the guys a boost. I think if they're kind of grinding to a halt a little bit, or even defensively, if they need a little bit, if they just need some fouls. I'm kind of talking myself into him over Kenrich Williams, who I already picked. Like, I think he does have his outsized personality is actually going to help his case. And even if he comes in for one foul, it's like some Action Jackson. When Phil Jackson was playing way back, I'm always trying to sneak my Knicks in here, Steve, as you know. My dad always said when he would come in the game, he wouldn't light up the stat sheet, but he would come in, he'd give you a hard foul, and the guys loved him as like a glue energy guy. So I like that. I like that you said that because I'm exactly on the same page. I think he's a guy who could very well not play tomorrow, but I think whatever impact he makes will jump off the page more than I think the stats would tell you.
Couldn't agree more, man. We got three players left. We got
Mhm.
Dylan Jones, AJ Mitchell, and Usman Yang. Who you take? These are, I think these might be the three inact. These might be some inact. These might at least two of these guys might be inactive tomorrow.
For
I
sure.
don't really know.
Yeah, and I mean again, I'm now going to like Zheng was the guy who did play, who was on the actual list of guys who are even options. The Frenchman was available the other night. So I just think purely based upon that and the fact that we could have some fun with like someone like Ryan Russillo arguing for him on a podcast and diving into it. I'm gonna pick him purely because also he's got some size to him. But interesting to see, I mean, guys like us are going to look at the actual actives and inactives. Like that's how much this boils down to. Whereas someone like Dylan Jones and Ajay Mitchell may not even be there. I just think because because he's got some more size to him, he might have a leg up in this whole mix. I mean, just one note on the actives and inactives, like he was a guy who was not even a reserve who was made available the other night in Game 6 as was Dylan Jones, as was Mitchell. So I think Dagnall's kind of late in this season, kind of experimenting with some things here, I think more than you might see from a guy who's about to coach a game seven in the biggest game of his life and the biggest game in the NBA in 8 years.
I think you're onto something there. I think going on that note, a guy who played 12 minutes in game six.
Yeah.
Um, I'm gonna go with AJ Mitchell.
Nice. Nice.
He had a plus he had a third he was plus 13 in
Yeah.
game six. So I think maybe he sees the floor, maybe a couple assists,
Yeah.
maybe
He's a high IQ
maybe a
ball mover, I
rebound.
would say.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows? We're definitely at the who knows part of here.
Yeah, yeah, but and sorry to interrupt you, but he is a guy who tends to move the ball. Ball doesn't stick, and again, maybe if they just need a spark of, hey, this is like a final possession in the second half, we need a guy to inbound it. Like this is we're getting down the nitty gritty. We have just enough time, Steve, to finally give our picks, I believe. We've had a ton of great lead up. We haven't necessarily exposed. Maybe we've unintentionally given some breadcrumbs and some clues, but like I said, the biggest game, the first game seven in the NBA in 9 seasons, I should have said. Really fun game tomorrow. Who are you picking to hoist the Larry O'Brien tomorrow? It's an interesting one. There's the we now that we've covered it all, I think we're really qualified to give it. Whereas we're not just kind of spewing off the jump.
I think for me, there are so many questions. I I question SGA. I question
Mhm.
Jalen Williams. I'm questioning OKC's defense now. Uh, One thing I don't question is Tyrese Halliburton in the
Mm,
clutch.
mm,
And if I'm going down on a Titanic ship, I think that's what I'm willing to go down with. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think I'm going to take Tyrese Halliburton to
mhm.
upset the Thunder and bring it home tomorrow in the fourth quarter. I think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be sloppy early,
Mm,
close game. Halliburton wins it. Let's go Pacers 101, Thunder 99.
mm. Good pick. Well thought out. I know it's a harder one. There's so many things these things hinge on. But like you, I think really well said about the question marks. Another thing I question is Dagnall, like we talked about. I don't question Rick Carlisle. We've seen the proof is in the pudding that this guy has done some phenomenal coaching jobs. Now it's in his second stint with Indiana. I really like that aspect of it, and I do think um, it's going to be a challenge. The Thunder are great at home. They have some of the best home fans in the league, and this is uh, coming from someone who loves Madison Square Garden, but that energy is unmatched. But I've always looked at the Thunder as a looming dynasty, and will basically is tomorrow a proving grounds for that dynasty to start, or I think will it just be clocked back 1 year. Because I think with all the assets they have, all the young pieces they have, they're just so much. The potential for them is so amazing. We haven't really seen a team this well set up in a long time. Where they won 68 games, they could win the finals tomorrow, and they still have this treasure chest. Like we really have never seen anything like it. But I do think the youth and experience, like I said, I'm an experienced guy. I'm picking a Hall of Fame coach. I'm picking the best clutch player of any in a long, long time. By what is it? What was the stat that he has the best of all time?
It's clutch time win probability added. In the
Uh,
last 2 minutes of the game, who has added the most win probability with made shots or missed shots? And every player has that metric who's taken a shot in the last 2 minutes of a game. And 2013 LeBron was silver medal, but it's Tyrese by a very large delta.
Wow. Wow. I mean that's to me that tells you a lot too. I'm not like you said, I'm not questioning that part of it. As well as the fact that they have a legitimate playoff riser in TJ McConnell. They have uh, a guy like Obi Toppin who's the most athletic player on the floor. There's a lot of things, and they have a guy in Siakam who's also done it before. I think there's just it's hard to say it because they're going to be on the road. And you mentioned that stat earlier. The road teams in Game Sevens almost never win. It's happened what, like 4 or 5 times in the NBA Finals history. But I'm picking Indiana as well. It's going to be buckle up, get your popcorn ready.
I can't believe we both just did that, to be
Yeah,
honest with you. This might look very foolish in
it could,
22
it
hours.
could,
It,
it could.
it could look rather foolish.
Because I think
Um,
both of us know that the Thunder can come out and steamroll, like they've done to other teams before. Like it's
I Yeah, I would say that's the second most, or if I'm going in my head, like the different scenarios that could happen, the
Mhm.
one I said was my prediction. The
Yeah,
second most likely scenario is that the Thunder in the second quarter go on like a 30-3 run
yeah,
and just end the game.
yeah,
And that's why you got to be ready, locked in for the whole game.
Mhm.
Because at any moment, the the stakes shift, and these teams have proven that they can just run away with a game
Mhm.
while you go downstairs to go get something to eat real quick,
Yeah,
turn the oven on, come back up. Next thing you know, it's been a 10-point swing.
yeah.
So couldn't be more excited, man. And I am so grateful to be spending the night before Game 7. 'Twas the night before Game 7. To spend it with you, man. There's an extra pep to the step,
hmm
and I'm glad to share it with you.
And right back at you, my friend. Really, really fun, super preview of the first Game 7, the penultimate game in 9 years. And folks, who knows how long it's going to be till the next one? I mean, we are to enjoy this. Um, we hope
To
you
think
do.
about it, man.
And
To think about it, I didn't even know you the last NBA Finals Game 7 we had. We did not know each other yet.
that's right. We
So
were both in high
it feels
school.
like I've known you a lifetime at this
Right.
point.
That's
So,
right. I mean, we were both in high school, and now we've both since graduated both high school and college. And it's been a 4 year term since we graduated college. So, all that being said, um,
and LeBron is still playing.
and LeBron is still playing and one of the best players in the league. Sach and the franchise will be locked in, tacked in for tomorrow's NBA Finals, and we'll come back with reactions after the biggest game in the NBA in a long time. Sach and the franchise, we love you, and we'll see you on the other side of the biggest game in the NBA in a long time. We love you.